Captain James Harrison stood at the viewport of the United Earth diplomatic vessel Horizon, watching the approaching luminary ships. Their crystalline hulls caught starlight and reflected it in mesmerizing patterns, a display that seemed both beautiful and deliberately intimidating. "Still sure about this, Captain?" Admiral Walsh's weathered face appeared in the reflection beside him. "No one would blame you for backing out." James straightened his dress uniform, the deep blue fabric highlighting his broad shoulders and military bearing. At 35, he was younger than most would expect for such a monumental diplomatic position, but his record spoke for itself. "With all due respect, Admiral, when humanity finally reaches the stars, we don't run away." The Luminari had appeared 6 months ago, their vast fleet emerging from what they called fold space at the edge of Earth's solar system. Their technology was centuries ahead of humanity's, but instead of conquest, they sought alliance, through marriage. Princess Kthara, third in line to the Luminari throne, would wed a chosen human representative. The selection process had been rigorous, testing everything from genetic compatibility to psychological resilience. James had emerged as the prime candidate, though he still didn't fully understand why. The grand reception hall of the Horizon had been specially modified to accommodate the Luminari delegation. Their atmosphere requirements were similar enough to Earth's, but they preferred different gravity and light settings. James watched as they entered, their crystalline armor catching and refracting light in ways that made them seem to shimmer in and out of existence. At their center walked a figure that could only be Princess Kthara. Like all Luminari nobility, she wore a veil of what appeared to be living light, obscuring every feature. The veil rippled and flowed like liquid starlight, making it impossible to discern even her basic shape. Captain Harrison, her voice resonated in his mind more than his ears, a musical quality that sent shivers down his spine. "You are either very brave or very foolish to accept this arrangement without demanding to see my true form." James bowed slightly, maintaining eye contact with where he believed her face would be. "Perhaps both, Your Highness." Humans often find those qualities go hand in hand. A sound like crystal wind chimes filled his mind, her laughter, he realized. "Fascinating. Your species continues to surprise us. Most races we've encountered demand extensive genetic and physical compatibility testing before even considering such unions." "We prefer to lead with trust," James replied, though he couldn't help but notice how the other Luminari tensed at his proximity to their princess. "Though I admit, curiosity is a very human trait." Kthara moved closer, the edge of her veil almost brushing his chest. "And what do you imagine lies beneath this veil, Captain? What horrors or wonders has your curious mind conjured?" "Whatever lies beneath," James said softly, "it won't change the importance of this alliance. Or my commitment to making it work." The princess went still, her veil swirling more slowly. "Even if I were to tell you that exposure to my true form could drive you mad? Or that my touch might burn your flesh?" James smiled, surprising himself with his certainty. "Then we'd figure out how to make it work. That's another very human trait, adaptability." The crystalline laughter came again, but softer this time, almost intimate. "The reports were right about you, James Harrison. You are different." She turned to address both delegations. "I accept this match. Let the binding arrangements begin." As the diplomats from both sides rushed to prepare the necessary documents, James caught Admiral Walsh's concerned expression. The older man shook his head slightly, a warning? Or resignation? Later that night, alone in his quarters, James studied the few facts known about Luminari physiology. Their crystalline technology was actually part of their biology, grown rather than built. They could manipulate light and energy in ways that seemed magical to human science. And their nobility, especially the royal family, were said to be different. A soft chime announced a message on his personal terminal. It was text only, written in elegantly flowing script. "My future husband. There are things you should know before the binding ceremony. Things I am forbidden to tell you directly. Watch the pattern of my veil when others speak of peace. Truth resonates differently than lies. K. James read the message 3 times before it dissolved into particles of light. The princess was trying to tell him something. But what? And more importantly, why? The binding ceremony was scheduled for 3 days' time. Whatever secrets lay beneath that veil of living light, whatever plans or plots swirled around this union, James knew one thing with certainty: humanity's first steps into a larger galactic community would be through him. And he would not falter. He touched the viewport, watching the luminary ships drift in formation around the horizon. Their crystalline hulls pulsed with internal light, like massive hearts beating in the void. "Well, princess," he murmured, "let's hope your faith in human adaptability isn't misplaced." In the darkness of space, the ship's lights seemed to pulse in response, as if they, or someone, had heard him. The next 2 days aboard the Horizon became a delicate dance of diplomacy and discovery. James found himself increasingly intrigued by Kthara's subtle warnings. During formal negotiations, he watched her veil carefully, noting how its patterns shifted and swirled differently when certain members of her delegation spoke. Particularly interesting was High Chancellor Vaxthor, whose every mention of lasting peace sent ripples of discord through Kthara's veil. The elderly Luminari official carried himself with regal bearing, his crystalline armor more elaborate than his peers, suggesting significant rank and influence. "Your princess seems troubled," Admiral Walsh commented during a private moment, his voice low. "The Luminari claim this marriage will cement our alliance, but something feels off." James nodded, keeping his voice equally quiet. "Have you noticed how their fleet is positioned? It's not a diplomatic formation, it's tactical." "Spotted that, did you?" Walsh's weathered face creased with concern. "Almost like they're expecting trouble. Or planning it." Before James could respond, a soft chime announced another presence. Kthara glided into the observation deck, her veil casting ethereal patterns across the walls. 2 Luminari guards flanked her, their crystalline armor pulsing with subtle threats. "Captain Harrison," her mental voice carried an urgency he hadn't heard before, "might I have a moment of your time? There are cultural matters we should discuss before the ceremony." The guards moved to follow as James offered his arm to the princess, but she dismissed them with a crystalline cord that somehow conveyed authority. Reluctantly, they withdrew. Once alone in a secure conference room, Kthara's veil began shifting more rapidly than James had ever seen. "We have little time," her voice whispered directly into his mind. "There are factions within my people who see this union differently than what's been publicly stated." "I gathered as much," James replied carefully. "Your veil patterns change dramatically when certain topics are discussed." A sound like tinkling crystal, her laugh, but darker this time. "You are observant, James Harrison. Most species cannot read our light patterns at all. But then, humans have always been different." She moved closer, her veil almost touching him. "What do you know of Luminari biology?" "Only what's in the public records. Your people are crystalline-based life forms, capable of manipulating light and energy. Your nobility is said to be more evolved." "Evolved," she echoed, the word carrying bitter harmonics. "That's one way to describe it. The truth is more complex. Our nobility isn't just different, we're dying. Genetic degradation from millennia of selective breeding. Each generation becomes more unstable, more." She trailed off as footsteps approached outside. In an instant, she had moved away to a proper diplomatic distance. The door opened to reveal High Chancellor Vaxthor. "My princess," his mental voice carried smooth authority. "The genetic compatibility tests are ready. Though I must again express concern about allowing untested human DNA to dash." "Thank you, Chancellor," Kthara cut him off, her veil patterns shifting to something more formal. "Captain Harrison and I were just discussing ceremony protocols." Vaxthor's crystalline form seemed to darken slightly. "Of course. Though speaking of protocols, it is inappropriate for you to be alone with him before the binding. James watched the interplay of power between them, noting how Kthara's veil patterns suggested both defiance and caution. There was history here, and not friendly history. The Chancellor is right, James said smoothly, bowing slightly to Kthara. We wouldn't want to violate any traditions. Thank you for the cultural insights, Your Highness. As he left the conference room, James caught a final whispered thought from Kthara: watch the light patterns during the ceremony. Truth cannot hide in direct illumination. That evening, James sat in his quarters reviewing everything he knew about Luminari politics. Their society was rigidly hierarchical, with the crystal nobility at the top maintaining power through controlled breeding programs. If what Kthara suggested was true, that their genetics were failing, this marriage might be more than just diplomacy. A soft alert drew his attention to the ship's sensors. The Luminari fleet was subtly repositioning, moving into what could easily become an attack formation with a few small adjustments. They were preparing for something. Computer, James commanded, analyze Luminari ship movements over the past 48 hours. Look for pattern correlations with scheduled ceremony events. As data scrolled across his screen, another message appeared, dissolving almost instantly. The light reveals truth, but shadows hold power. When the veil lifts, be ready. Tomorrow was the ceremony. Whatever game was being played here, whatever forces were moving in the shadows, James knew humanity's future might depend on his ability to understand these cryptic warnings. And perhaps more importantly, his ability to adapt to whatever truth lay beneath that shimmering veil. He touched the crystalline communication device the Luminari had given him, watching how it pulsed in response to his bioelectric field. There was still so much they didn't understand about their new allies. Or were they allies at all? In the artificial night of the ship's cycle, James made his preparations. If there was one thing humans excelled at, it was preparing for the unexpected. Tomorrow would bring either peace or conflict, revelation or disaster. Either way, he would be ready. The binding ceremony chamber aboard the Horizon had been transformed. Crystalline structures grew from the walls, pulsing with internal light that shifted through colors humans had no names for. The assembled dignitaries from both Earth and the Luminari created a stark contrast, the practical uniforms of humanity facing the living crystal formations of their alien counterparts. James stood at the ceremonial center, his dress uniform adorned with the new insignia of Earth's diplomatic corps. Through careful observation, he'd noted at least 3 distinct groups among the Luminari delegates, those whose crystals pulsed in harmony with Kthara's patterns, those aligned with Vaxthor's darker resonance, and a smaller group that seemed to shift between the two. Admiral Walsh approached, his voice barely a whisper. The Luminari fleet has completed their new formation. If they were to power up weapons, they'd have clear firing solutions on Earth's major defense installations, James finished. I know. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. A harmonious chord announced Kthara's arrival. She seemed to float into the chamber, her veil more radiant than ever, patterns shifting so rapidly they were almost hypnotic. The traditional binding ceremony began, a complex mixture of Earth's diplomatic protocols and Luminari energy rituals. High Chancellor Vaxthor presided, his crystalline form towering over the proceedings. We gather to bind not just 2 individuals, but 2 species, his mental voice resonated through the chamber. Through this union, we ensure lasting peace and genetic stability. James caught the slight pause, noting how Kthara's veil patterns disrupted at those words. Something was coming. Before the final binding, Vaxthor continued, our laws require the unveiling. Captain Harrison, are you prepared to witness the true form of your intended? I am, James replied firmly, though he noted several Luminari guards shifting into strategic positions around the chamber. Kthara turned to face him. Her mental voice touched his mind privately, remember, James, truth cannot hide in direct illumination. Whatever happens next, trust your human instincts. With graceful movements, she began to dissolve her veil. The living light that had hidden her form for so long flowing away like liquid starlight. The assembled crowd gasped, and James understood why. Kthara's true form was breathtaking, but not in the way anyone had expected. Her crystalline body was partially transparent, revealing internal structures that pulsed with complex energy patterns. But what caught everyone's attention were the fractures, dozens of them, running through her form like lightning frozen in crystal. "Behold," Vaxthor's voice carried triumph, "the truth we've hidden for generations. Our noble line isn't evolving, it's breaking. Each generation becomes more fractured, more unstable. And now you understand why this union cannot be allowed to proceed." Guards moved forward, their crystalline weapons forming from their arms. But James was already moving, placing himself between them and Kthara. "Actually," he said calmly, "I understand something else entirely." He reached out and took Kthara's hand, ignoring the warnings from both delegations. Where their skin touched, something remarkable happened. The fractures in Kthara's crystalline form began to stabilize, human bioelectricity interacting with luminary energy patterns in ways neither species had predicted. Her inner light grew stronger, more focused. "Impossible," Vaxthor snarled, his own form darkening ominously. "The simulations showed." "Showed what?" Kthara's voice rang out, no longer just in their minds but physically, carrying new strength. "That human adaptability might be exactly what our people need. That your carefully maintained genetic program was wrong." Chaos erupted in the chamber. Vaxthor's followers moved to seize control, but they hadn't counted on human preparedness. Admiral Walsh's security teams had been quietly positioned throughout the ceremony, and they moved with practiced efficiency. "The fleet," James called out, maintaining his hold on Kthara's hand. "They'll try to." "No," Kthara smiled, her crystalline face catching the light in mesmerizing ways. "Watch." Above them, the luminary ships were indeed moving, but not to attack. The vessels commanded by Kthara's loyalists had anticipated Vaxthor's plan, positioning themselves to neutralize any aggressive action. "Your genetic purity program is over, Chancellor," Kthara declared. "Our people need change to survive. Humanity offers that chance, not through conquest or submission, but through willing partnership." James felt energy coursing through their joined hands, strange new sensations as his human biology interacted with her crystalline form. "I'm guessing this isn't a normal reaction." Kthara's laugh was like wind through crystal chimes. "Nothing about this is normal, James Harrison. Your touch, it resonates with our crystalline structure, stabilizing what generations of selective breeding damaged. You're proof that our salvation lies not in isolation, but in connection." Vaxthor and his supporters were quickly contained, their weapons deactivated by the same energy harmonics that had revealed their plans. As Earth's security teams coordinated with Kthara's loyal guards, James finally had a moment to really look at his bride. "You're beautiful," he said simply, watching the play of light through her crystalline form. "Though I admit, I wasn't expecting quite so much transparency." "Are you disappointed?" she asked, the fractures in her form continuing to stabilize wherever they touched. "Quite the opposite. Humans have a saying, true beauty shines from within. In your case, quite literally." Their laughter, human and crystalline, merged in the chamber as both delegations began to understand the full implications of what they'd witnessed. This wasn't just a diplomatic union anymore, it was the beginning of something entirely new. The days following the binding ceremony transformed the horizon into a hub of frenzied scientific activity. Human and luminary researchers worked side by side, studying the unprecedented interaction between James's biology and Kthara's crystalline form. Their joined hands had become a symbol of hope for both species. "Remarkable," Dr. Patel murmured, adjusting her scanning equipment. "Captain, your cellular structure is actually adapting to process crystalline energy. And Princess, your fracture patterns are rewriting themselves at the molecular level." Kthara's form shimmered with amusement. The Chancellor's worst fear realized: human adaptability is contagious. James watched in fascination as ribbons of light danced between their joined hands. The connection had grown stronger since the ceremony, allowing them to share not just touch, but sensations, emotions, even fragments of thoughts. "You're worried," he said softly, feeling her concern ripple through their bond. "The Luminary Conclave has called an emergency session," Cthara replied, her inner light pulsing with anxiety. "Many still support Vaxthor's vision of genetic purity, even from his detention chamber. They fear what this change means for our society." Before James could respond, Admiral Walsh burst into the lab. "We've got trouble. 3 Luminary cruiser-class vessels just emerged from Fold space. They're demanding we hand over both of you for genetic purification." The crystalline orthodox, Cthara's form darkened with recognition. "Religious extremists who believe our species' purity is sacred. They'll see our binding as blasphemy." James felt her fear through their connection, but also her determination. "How many loyal ships do we have?" "4 in defensive positions," Walsh reported. "But these cruisers are heavily armed, and their crews are fanatics." "There might be another way," Cthara said suddenly. "James, our bond, it's stronger than just cellular compatibility. When we touch, we can channel energy through the crystalline matrices. If we could amplify that effect." Understanding dawned. "We could potentially disable their weapons without destroying the ships." He turned to Dr. Patel. "How quickly can you rig an amplification chamber?" The scientist's eyes lit up with possibility. "Give me 2 hours and unlimited access to Luminary crystal tech." They worked against time, human ingenuity combining with Luminary crystal science in ways neither species had imagined possible. Cthara guided the growth of crystalline amplification structures while James helped the engineering team modify the ship's power systems to handle the energy load. Through their strengthening bond, they moved in perfect synchronization, anticipating each other's needs. James found himself understanding complex crystal engineering concepts instinctively, while Cthara developed an intuitive grasp of human tactical thinking. "Ready for power-up," Dr. Patel announced, just as the enemy cruisers moved into attack position. James and Cthara stood at the center of the hastily constructed chamber, surrounded by growing crystal formations that hummed with potential energy. Their joined hands glowed brighter than ever. "This could be dangerous," Cthara warned, her free hand tracing the line of his jaw. "No human has ever channeled this much crystalline energy." James smiled, sending waves of reassurance through their bond. "No Luminary has ever had a human anchor either. We adapt, remember?" The enemy ships opened fire. Energy beams lanced toward the horizon, only to be caught in the expanding field of crystalline resonance emanating from the chamber. Where their hands joined, power built to impossible levels. James felt Cthara's crystalline nature through every cell of his body, while she experienced the endless adaptability of human biology. Together, they created something entirely new, a hybrid energy that reached out to the attacking ships and transformed their weapon crystals into inert formations. The Orthodox crews found themselves powerless, their ships' crystalline systems responding to the new harmonic frequencies created by human Luminary union. "Impossible," the Orthodox leader's mental voice rang with shock. "Our crystals are pure, consecrated by generations of—" "Your crystals are dying," Cthara interrupted, her voice carrying through the calm channels. "Just like our nobility's genetic line. Look at your own readings. The harmonics James and I create together don't corrupt your systems, they heal them." Through their bond, James helped her project images of their cellular interaction, showing how human adaptability wasn't destroying Luminary purity but reinvigorating it with new potential. The Orthodox ships hung motionless in space as their crews grappled with this revelation. Generations of religious doctrine collided with undeniable evidence of positive change. Later, in their quarters, James held Cthara close, marveling at how natural it felt to embrace her crystalline form. "You know, this is just the beginning. There will be more resistance, more challenges." "Of course," she chimed softly, her inner light pulsing in harmony with his heartbeat. We're rewriting the future of both our species. Change never comes easily. She traced patterns of light across his chest. But there's something else troubling you. James nodded, still amazed by how easily she read him through their bond. The cellular changes in my body, they're accelerating. Dr. Patel's last scan showed crystalline structures forming in my nervous system. Are you afraid? Clara asked, though she could feel his emotion already. Not afraid, he replied thoughtfully. More, curious. Humans have always dreamed of evolving beyond our current form. Maybe this bond between us is just the first step on that journey. Clara's form brightened with joy and something else, a new pattern he hadn't seen before. Speaking of evolution. She began, her inner light pulsing with excitement. James felt it through their bond before she could say the words, a new energy signature, tiny but growing, where their combined genetic material had created something unprecedented. We're going to have a child, he breathed, wonder filling him as he sensed the hybrid life form growing within her crystalline matrix. The first of their kind, Clara confirmed, her happiness radiating through their connection. Neither fully human nor purely luminary, but something gloriously new. As they held each other, both could feel their shared hope for the future. Their bond had started as a diplomatic arrangement, transformed into a biological miracle, and now promised to reshape both their species in ways no one could have predicted. The crystalline structures in the room pulsed in harmony with their joined energy, a literal light in the darkness of space, showing the way forward for both their peoples. 6 months after the confrontation with the Orthodox fleet, the great crystal spires of the luminary capital world Crystallos sparkled with unprecedented brilliance. The planet's entire crystalline ecosystem seemed to respond to the presence of the hybrid child growing within Cthulhu's matrix, as if nature itself celebrated this new evolution. James stood at the window of their crystal-grown quarters, watching the sunset create rainbow cascades through the city's towers. His own transformation had progressed steadily, crystalline formations now traced elegant patterns beneath his skin, allowing him to interface directly with luminary technology. More importantly, his deepening bond with Cthulhu had revealed possibilities neither species had imagined. The council is ready, Cthulhu announced, gliding into the room. Her pregnancy had enhanced her natural luminescence, making her glow like a captured star. Through their bond, James felt both her excitement and apprehension. Let them wait a moment, he said, drawing her into his arms. Where their skin touched, light danced between them, and they could feel their child's consciousness reaching out with curious energy tendrils. How are you feeling? Strong, she replied, leaning into him. Though our little one is quite active today. She seems to share her father's inability to sit still. James laughed, feeling their daughter's response through their shared connection. The hybrid child's development had defied all predictions, combining human adaptability with luminary energy manipulation in ways that transformed both. Every scan revealed new abilities, new potential. The Orthodox faction is making another push in the council, Cthulhu said more seriously. They're demanding genetic sanctions, trying to prevent more human luminary pairs from bonding. Even though the evidence is literally staring them in the face. James gestured at the thriving crystal gardens visible through their window. Since their bonding, similar gardens across Crystallos had shown unprecedented growth and vitality, as if the entire planet responded to the introduction of human adaptability. Change is difficult, Cthulhu reminded him, her inner light pulsing with determination. But they cannot deny the results. The fractures in noble bloodlines are healing. Young luminari are discovering they can bond with humans in ways we never thought possible. Even Vaxthor has begun to see the truth. The mention of the former chancellor brought a slight smile to James's face. Their old adversary had become an unlikely ally after witnessing the positive changes in luminary society. His scientific mind couldn't deny the evidence, even if it contradicted generations of belief. We should go, James said, feeling the council's impatience through the crystal network he could now access. They're about to vote on the hybrid integration protocol. Together, They made their way to the Grand Council chamber, their passage marked by the brightening of crystal formations wherever they walked. Other luminari stopped to bow, many dropping their traditional veils in a show of support for the new era of openness their union had inspired. The council chamber itself was packed with representatives from both species. Human diplomats and scientists sat comfortably among luminari nobles, their own bodies beginning to show signs of crystal adaptation from prolonged exposure to luminari environments. High Counselor Meridian, who had replaced Vax Thor, rose to address the gathering. We stand at a crossroads, her mental voice reached all present. Before us lies a choice between clinging to tradition and embracing a new future. The evidence of positive change surrounds us, yet some still fear what we might lose. James felt Kthara's hand tighten in his as their child responded to the emotional energies in the room. Through their bond, they could sense the swirling currents of hope and fear among the assembled delegates. Perhaps, James stepped forward, his voice carrying the harmonic overtones he'd developed, we should let actions speak louder than words. He raised their joined hands, allowing all present to see how their energies intertwined, how the crystalline patterns in his skin complemented Kthara's form perfectly. Kthara joined him, her free hand resting on her swollen midsection. Our child carries the future of both species within her matrix. Not as a dilution of either, but as an enhancement of both. Already, she shows abilities we're only beginning to understand. As if in response, their daughter's consciousness reached out, touching the minds of all present. The chamber filled with gasps as humans and luminari alike experienced a vision of possibility, a future where both species evolved together, combining the best aspects of each. The vote that followed was merely a formality. The hybrid integration protocol passed with overwhelming support, opening the way for more human luminari bonds and establishing research initiatives to study the remarkable changes occurring in both species. Later that night, as twin moons cast their light through the crystal spires of their home, James held Kthara as they felt their daughter's consciousness exploring her developing abilities. She's going to change everything, Kthara mused, her inner light pulsing with maternal pride. She already has, James replied, watching crystalline patterns dance across his skin in response to his emotions. Though I doubt even she will be prepared for how fast humans and luminari adapt to these changes. We're already seeing second-generation effects in both species. Kthara turned in his arms, her crystalline form fitting perfectly against him. Are you ever afraid of how far this transformation might go? James considered the question, feeling the complex swirl of emotions through their bond. I'm excited, he finally said. Humans have always dreamed of transcending our limitations. We just never imagined we'd do it hand in hand with another species. Their daughter's consciousness brushed against their minds, sharing impressions of light and energy, of infinite possibilities and fearless exploration. In her developing awareness, they saw the truth, this was not the end of either species, but the beginning of something greater than both. The stars are waiting, Kthara whispered, both aloud and through their bond. And now we'll explore them together, as something entirely new. James pulled her closer, feeling their child's joy at the contact. Outside their window, the crystal spires of Crystallos pulsed with new light, a beacon of change visible from orbit. Somewhere out there, other humans and luminari were discovering their own connections, beginning their own transformations. The future was uncertain, but it shone brighter than either species had ever dreamed possible. And it all began because one human was willing to marry a princess without seeing her face, and one princess was brave enough to believe in change. Their daughter kicked, sending cascades of light through Kthara's form, and both parents laughed, their combined joy making the crystals around them sing. The next chapter of both their species' evolution was about to begin, written in light and love and fearless adaptation to whatever challenges lay ahead. In the growing darkness of space, Crystallos shone like a newborn star, its light carrying the promise of transformation to all who were ready to embrace a future where the boundaries between species dissolved in the face of love's infinite adaptability.